My name is John Gressel. When I was a younger man, I made some bad decisions. I got involved with the wrong people. 12 years later, after the crime was committed, I realized the mistake that I made and turned my life around. Went back to school, I got married, had children, and then the whole world came crashing down on me. I received a phone call from the police department in regards to something they wanted to discuss that happened years ago. 17 years later, I'm here now at the halfway house and trying to get established back in society. I met a wonderful woman and we had 3 kids. The relationship didn't work out and we got divorced. We shared custody and they were fairly young when I did get arrested, so I missed a good chunk of their life.
My name's Noah Pierce. I was born and raised in Prospect, Connecticut. I'm 23 years old. I currently reside in Waterbury, Connecticut, and I'm a single father to my 8-month-old son, Ivan. I grew up in a really abusive household. My dad worked a lot of hours. I went to school and I didn't really fit in with the crowd because I didn't really have value to my own life. Honestly, the thing that brought value to my life was my son.
Yeah, I was incarcerated because I violated my probation for driving under suspension. I was originally on probation for possession of heroin and driving under suspension, unregistered vehicle, misuse of plates, no insurance. I'd say out of the last 10 years, I served 7 of them in prison. I have a 14-year-old son. He lives with his mother right now.
Prior to getting arrested, anytime I had an issue with the kids, we'd go through family court, whether it was changing a visitation. You know, the divorce wasn't a good one, so there was a lot of hard feelings between my ex-wife and myself. Up to that point, you know, everything worked out fine in the system. The courts, you know, heard my side, heard her side in regards to visitation, child support. Everything was fine and worked out. However, as soon as I was arrested, when I stood in that courtroom wearing a tan, state DOC uniform, I felt like I was no longer a human being. No one really wanted to hear what I had to say.
At one point, it was like Christmas time, and I had a girlfriend I had been seeing for a little bit, so she was coming to my house for Christmas. I had my son for that day. His mother showed up and just like caused a gigantic scene, and she took the kid, threw him over her shoulders, and dragged him out screaming. And I didn't want to make it any harder on him, so I didn't like fight with her at the time that was happening. I just wanted her to get him calm down or whatever. I told her I don't want to be with you. I like to just keep it civil with you, and so I can keep seeing my son, and that's it. And she didn't like it. She kept giving me the ultimatums like, well, if you don't want him, you don't. If you don't want me, you don't want him.
Our relationship with your son?
I haven't had one since I took the 4 years this time.
When Ivan was born, his mother went into early labor and I went to the hospital like any father would do in the circumstance, I think. Let's rush you over there, let's make sure everything's okay. I ran home to get the insurance cards out of her purse, and that's when I found needles. So that was a nightmare of a situation. I think I got back to the hospital and I took 45 minutes before I went inside because I was screaming, crying. I didn't know how to process what I was going through. Tried calling everyone on my list, you know, my mom, my dad, anybody, and I couldn't get anybody to pick up the phone other than the woman who had adopted her from birth. Because she's got a tragic story as it is in her background. She was born to 2 drug addicts and they left her in the hospital and she was abandoned. And I could never let that happen to my son. I could never imagine being abandoned like that. So when I had found the needles, I had called her mother and I tried to get the whole situation brought to light. I would have gone into the hospital immediately to tell the doctors of the situation that she needed to be tested and Ivan needed to be tested upon birth. And tests were positive for marijuana and heroin. And my blood still runs cold. So that was the bomb. And then on top of that, the state had wanted to remove Ivan from custody pretty much immediately.
The big surprising thing was the family relations person that was assigned to the case was not very nice to me. On occasion, she'd come downstairs when I was in the holding cell waiting to go up. She basically said, you know, you're not going to see your kids anyway. You're going away for 25 years, so you might as well just sign over your parental rights. And I was in a facility where we could have contact visits. We would sit at a table, you know, round table. I could read books to them if I wanted to and whatnot. So I contacted them and indicated that I wanted to have visits with my children. And then I went to court and was told, well, basically, because you haven't seen them for so long, it's, you know, they're in therapy still. We're going to see how this plays out. At first, I did have some phone contact with them. The judge put an order that she was to maintain phone contact with me, but every time I called, the number was not in service, and I've been to court several times, going back and forth, the family court, trying to see my kids, and finally the last time I said, Your Honor, I said, you know what, I give up. I go to the visiting room, I see other fathers with little kids, babies, that are, Daddy, Daddy, come running into the visiting room. It's great, you know, for the kids as well for the fathers to see their expressions on both faces. I was hoping to be able to maintain that kind of relationship with my children. Yeah, while I was incarcerated for 17 years, I did not see my children at all.
She has another son. She wasn't around for her son for 3 years, so when they had come in, pretty much they had said that she had neglected him for 3 years and we need the child, but I was the father and I had signed for rights, so at that point it had already become a battle. So the battle became then, was the family going to stay together? Could she get better? Does she want to get better? And she tried rehab, and she came back from the first 30-day rehab and she was home for 22 days exact. And in those 22 days, she barely spent time with Ivan. We were suspicious that she was using again, so we had her leave the house. And from there, she's bounced from sober home to rehab to sober home. And even right now, I haven't heard from her in 2.5 weeks.
My relationship with my kids now is, when my daughter finally turned of age, she did contact her grandmother and she did contact me. I was able to see her, but it was really strange. I could have pulled a person off the street, sat down with them, and had a conversation with them, and that's kind of what it felt like.
She tried to say that my son didn't know me, but a DCF worker, I guess, went and met with her, brought some pictures, showed him a bunch of pictures, like a lineup, I don't know. And do you know this person? Well, I don't know that person. Do you know this person? I don't know that person. Do you know this person? Yeah, that's my father. Her father was there, so he told me what happened, and at no point did he not know who I was. So that was like her main thing at the time, was that, you know, he didn't know who I was, which proved her wrong when they showed him the pictures. At the time, I was getting letters from him and writing letters to him, and then she just wrote me a letter one day and told me to stop writing him, that it was like hurting his feelings or whatever. So I felt like, because I didn't want to see him in jail, because I was like ashamed of it, and I didn't like to see him over a border, and, you know. So then by the time I ended up into the 3 years, I got a whole bunch of papers saying that she was serving me with termination of rights papers, that I had to go to court. It was confusing to me because I didn't understand how I never heard anything about it before that. After she already knew I was in jail, she started putting my something in the back of the paper, like looking for John Doe, father of so-and-so. And I never responded because I was in jail. And I mean, I don't think I ever would have seen that in the first place because I never knew that that was happening. And mind you, I'm still talking to her father and all this. Like, she went behind a lot of people to get it done.
Yeah, I'm a person who made a very bad mistake, but I love my children and they love me from, every time I call the little phone contact I had with them when I first got arrested, always expressing for wanting to see me. When are we going to see you? When are we going to see you? That hurt, and I'm sure it hurt them as well.
Like you. All I want to do is see my son. I'll be civil with you. I'm not going to disrespect you. I don't disrespect your boyfriend. I expect you to do the same thing. So when I got out of jail, my son was calling me Daddy Phil. He was calling the other guy Daddy Bob. So when I finally got alone with him, I was talking to him, and he says, he's like, do I have to keep calling you then? And I'm like, keep calling me what? He's like, Daddy Phil. He's like, I don't like calling Daddy Bob, Daddy Bob. So I'm like, well, what do you want to call me? He's like, well, I'd rather call you just Dad. And I'm like, well, that's fine if you, he's like, but I can't do it in front of Mom. I don't really have one. The last time I saw him, his mother had a fit because I had a girl in the car with me.
So there was some concerns immediately in the hospital that Ivan was not my son. I have not gotten a paternity test done, and I don't need to, because regardless, I will always love my boy, because Ivan is just my world. No matter like I said, no matter what the circumstance could have been, I could never leave a child unloved and left alone in a hospital. So with the paternity, it actually had gotten brought up in court after a while. 3 or 4 months into me having custody, paternity was questioned in court. And when it was raised, normally when it's questioned, I guess it's handled with an immediate paternity test, but given the circumstances, I've been here to provide since day one, and I've never changed my love for Ivan. I've always been there for him. He's my son. The paternity got thrown out in court because all 3 attorneys pretty much stood to say that I've been doing everything since day one, and that shouldn't be questioned because I signed paternity rights in that hospital and I am his father. And as far as anybody's concerned, that's the case, including the mother. I was really connected to her, and when I found out what was going on with the drug use, we tried to keep the family together, and that fell apart. So that was really difficult for me, and I still struggle daily, waking up wondering if I could have done anything differently. But I'm doing the best that I can to provide for my son and keep him safe, which is most important. That's the only priority I have in my life.
Fathers, they're on the short end of the stick. Basically, mothers mostly get their point of view across, but no one really wants to hear what the father has to say. Especially if he has some kind of criminal history, it's a stigma, and they're like, well, he's a bad guy, he can't be a good father. Basically, a lot of the times, we're just told, well, this is what's going to happen, it's our way or the highway, and that's it. And a lot of people get discouraged, because there's a lot of guys that got stories to tell about how things happen with family courts.
I don't think that the fathers get really quick to just take the father right out of the picture. I think that in my case, it probably had a lot to do with my criminal record. Like if you don't sit, I think that to make a father more known, they have to sit down with him, talk to him, ask him some questions, which is I don't think a lot of what they do. They're more judgmental on what they see on paper as opposed to the actual human being that they're dealing with.
I've had the struggle of working with the state and trying to apply for assistance in some circumstances where I get denied, or I get put on a waiting list for things like childcare. I called to 33 different daycares pretty much begging to offer some sort of help, some sort of like specialized sliding scale for me, a single father with a newborn at the time who was trying to just work to pay my bills.
My experience has been, whether it's been black, Hispanic, or white, it doesn't matter because we all wear the same uniform, the tan browns, and then we're all bad people, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, at this point for me, my time is done. I can't get that time back with my kids. So the reason I'm sitting here is I'm saying this, so hopefully the individuals at this conference can maybe help the future guys coming down the road that are going to be in the situation that I was in and not allow this to happen.
It gives me hope that someday maybe I could at least be involved with him, and that he's a good, that I could have positive influence on him. I just feel like I haven't been allowed to.
The thing that gives me hope has always been faith-based for me. It's definitely a strong presence of God in my life, to my understanding. It's definitely been a struggle going through a lot of the things that I've gone through now, but it's always been just a backup for me. You know, no matter what was going on in my life, I could always turn, whether it was praying or going to church or just going out into the woods to sit by myself and catching a breeze when you have that thought go through your mind. You know, it's those little things that have carried me through a lot.
Earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, the physical appearance definitely has something to do with it. I don't shave my head because I'm skinny. I shave my head because I'm more bald. And it just feels cleaner to me than not having hair on the top of my head. But in a court situation, I could imagine that my appearance going in there with a shaved head and with a criminal record, I can only imagine what they think.
I mean, I'm a farmer personally, so I get covered in mud when I'm working, and you know, sometimes I'm late for an appointment and I just gotta go right there. I've gotten the faces. If I consistently went in farm gear, I think I would have a lot more difficulty working with the providers for sure, because people would just think, you know, that's some filthy person I don't want to spend any time with, and I think that can be really complicated for some people sometimes, especially in harder positions. I started working with DCF pretty much immediately in the hospital, and I had a caseworker and an investigator assigned to me. My ex was already involved in the program, so I got segued being the father of her new son. And that's when Johnny, my counselor, and I met, and since then we meet once a week. We text regularly. I call him if I ever have any sort of trouble, or whether it be a parenting question or just a man-to-man question, I've been able to go to him. So the positive parenting program has been a major influence in my life, and a definite positive influence in my opinion.
And one of the programs that's out there that I am a part of is the FELT program. You know, these are a bunch of people that get together to provide services, to come up with different ideals so that we can provide services to people, not services to the clients, but services to service providers, and to help them understand that, you know, we can make a difference if we just humble ourselves and engage these guys and treat them like individuals. You know, sometimes different cases are harder than the next case, but you know what? Don't let one case dictate how you feel about the next case. You know, don't look at your work as a caseload. Look at each individual as an individual. The people behind your caseload, they need your help. So I think if we provide trustworthy services to our clients, I think we can make a difference on a day-to-day basis. I feel that one of the issues as far as where providers are available for my guys is that when they come in, a lot of these guys are angry. A lot of these guys are frustrated. A lot of these guys have used drugs. They've been to prison, and they want to get on the right track. And what happens sometimes, I think, when they come into different agencies, these agencies are not providing them with the proper information, the proper guidelines that they can use so that they can get on the right track. So what happens is a lot of these guys come in, they get pamphlets, they get told to go here, get told to go there, but they need someone to guide them through it. I think if we're able to take this information that we're providing for our clients and we walk them through the information, it would be a little bit easier for them. And I think that's a big roadblock for a lot of the clients, not understanding the information. So you're giving them information, but they don't know what to do with the information. So that's definitely a challenge for our guys. I think of parents, education, and language, as far as engaging with providers, is a challenge. on both ends, to be fair, because providers don't know what they're getting. You know, some of these providers are straight out of college. They don't, you know what I mean? They've never been in situations where they had someone walk in that didn't speak like them, or didn't look like them, or didn't dress like them. So it's a challenge on both ends. So I think one of the things is education, not necessarily just educating the client, saying that, well, you have to change your appearance, change the way your dialogue is, change the way you look. We also have to educate providers also on what group of people they're dealing with. You know what I mean? The stereotype is there. You can't hide it, can't mask it, it's there. And I think what happens is, along the way, we have to find some middle ground. You know what I mean? Clients have to take responsibility for the way they talk, the way they look, the way they are educated. Providers have to also find a little humility and understand different situations that people may be going through. It's like, and some people don't care how you look at them. And if someone walks in your office as a provider and they have that attitude that they don't care what you think about them, they can address, they have tattoos, they look and talk a different way. A provider, you know what, you got to treat them just like you treated the last person that came in before him. You have to treat them with respect. You have to be professional. And it's difficult. It's difficult for a provider. It really is difficult for a provider, because now you're stuck. You don't know what to say, what to do, because you're not accustomed to that situation.
In my opinion, what makes a good father is a dedicated individual who, you know, is willing to provide for the family, always, you know, stay constant in their life to make sure that they get the love and support that they need, both at home and just like around.
I think I'm a decent person. I've made a couple of bad choices in my life. I'm remorseful for the harm that I've caused. Every day I try to be a little better in terms of my outlook on life and people in general, and how can I give back to society instead of take. I always did care about my kids. Always wanted the best for them. Never wanted this to affect them, unfortunately.
I want people to know that I love my son. I would have been a good influence on my son, regardless of whatever my situation was, because I'm not going to raise somebody up in the world to be like an evil or bad person. I feel like I was jaded in a way, that they just took me out of somebody's life without ever even knowing who I was. So they just took me for what was on paper. I'm not a bad person. And I love my son. That's what I want people to take away with this.
If there's one thing I want people to know about me being a father, it would be that I'm capable of having compassion. I'm a rough farmer. I spend my time in a tractor or a truck, and I'm out picking vegetables all day long. That's what I do. So when I come home and I'm dirty and I got a shower and everything, after I go to the gym, you know, I hold my son and I love him to death. I play with him for hours until we both fall asleep. And it's just the most amazing thing in the world. I came from an abusive home where I was beat by my father. Everybody had blood drawn, watched my mother. Tough. But coming from that and going forward, I broke the cycle. So if there's one message that I can give to the world, it's that you can break that cycle.